Hi, I'm Harish Reddy and welcome back to my channel. Today we are continuing our session on AWS observability, and today's topic is how do you set up an AWS observability lab, test lab. And this is the first part. There are going to be multiple parts because it's a long process to set up the lab. So I'm going to do multiple sessions or divide it into multiple parts, but today we are just going to see how do we set up an AWS observability test lab. So yeah, here's the agenda. So first thing, why we need observability lab, and there are two types of observability, AWS observability, that we are going to look today, and finally the setup process. So those are three things that I want to cover in today's session. So let's begin. So why we need an observability lab? So I strongly recommend an in-house observability lab for in every organization. Every doesn't matter how big or small your team is. I strongly recommend you set up this lab so that your team members can understand the value of AWS monitoring, tracing, and logging, the capabilities and the value it brings. So you can implement the same for your production applications and production infrastructure. So once you start having this lab, so whenever they run into a question, they have a question, or they want to test something new, they can come in and always try it in the in-house lab, observability lab, and then they can go ahead and do it in the production system. So that is one main reason I mean we need this lab for training. So you may say that, hey, I do have some test systems, development systems and stuff. Yeah, that's true, but you don't want to play with or damage the systems and rebuild them and do all of that stuff. You want to be able to see how it works as AWS recommends first, and then you want to implement that in your dev test and prod. So that's the reason to have this lab. So there are two types of observability that this lab provides. One is AWS native observability, the other one is AWS managed open source observability. So AWS native observability it includes, as I said in the earlier session, all features of Amazon CloudWatch, that is basically logging, tracing, and logging and monitoring, and then AWS X-ray, which is used for tracing. So the native full stack native observability offers you are offered by Amazon CloudWatch and X-ray. Now, AWS also offers managed open source observability, and that it is done through managed open source services, mainly the Grafana and Prometheus for containers. So these are the two that you are going to see, and also there is one more called AWS distro for open telemetry ADOT. So we'll talk about that when we get to that session. Those are all managed open source. So why is AWS offering managed open source? It's simple. So AWS offers these services because you don't have to host the software, upgrade them, scale these solutions yourselves. So AWS offers this managed open source observability also as an option if you want to use them. But it's a choice. If you already are using open source options, Grafana and others, so you can go ahead and switch to managed open source. If you're doing it for the first time, I strongly recommend you go forward with native observability. So those are the two types. The next thing is the setup process. So the setup process involves implementing a workshop. So there is something called AWS observability workshop, which is what we are going to do. So I'll share. So here, if you see here, one observability workshop. So this is a workshop that we are going. It's going to take 3 to 4 hours. So that's the reason I just want to show you how the whole thing. Then you can decide for yourself if it is worth your time to implement it in your business. So this is the observability workshop homepage, and what we are basically trying to do is really trying to set up this particular architecture. This particular there is an application, adoptions application, and this is basically we are trying to do. So Once we deploy everything, and then we have these observability services, X-Ray, CloudWatch, Grafana, and Prometheus. So these things that these are the observability services that we are going to explore once we have the infrastructure set up. So this is a setup process that is going to take some time, and the reason to follow this workshop instead of doing it yourself is, as you see, there are some cleanup instructions if you want to clean up, right, once it is done. But if you do all this stuff yourself, it's going to take a while. Rather, what this allows us to do is it allows us to programmatically deploy this environment in 3 to 4 hours, and it should be up and running, and you should be able to start exploring it more, all the options that you have for observability. So that said, so that is the agenda for today. So what I covered is really the what is observability workshop, why do we need an observability lab, and then the two different types of observability, and finally the setup process. And I hope this video keeps you excited to know what's coming next, because I can't cover everything in one session. So if you like this video, go ahead, subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to start posting a lot on how to set up CloudWatch, configure it, and how to monitor all these services, different databases, applications, EC2 instances, and also the containers. So we're going to learn a lot in the coming sessions. So thanks for watching, and talk to you soon.